Yeah. I'm on. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. It looks like we're live. Hello. Thank you very much for joining us. We have a fabulous panel ahead of us just now, so I'm going to wait a little bit for my panelists to join, and which will be over the next few minutes, and then we'll start.
All right, I can share now. Okay. Keisha, do you see me? Is this Karsten? And you can hear us. All right, very good.
Hello, Karsten. How are you? Hello, Sean.
Hello, hello.
Hello. And there's Lou.
Yes. Good afternoon.
Hello. And we're waiting just for Juliet, and then we can start.
Right.
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, wherever you're from.
Hi, Juliet.
Hello, Juliet.
Super. So we have our...
Oh, I think we've got to mute.
We've got some feedback. If I can ask everyone to mute, and then turn on when it's time.
Sorry, what was that?
I can ask everybody to just mute their microphone until I call you, which means just keep your mouse at the ready. Good. We're starting now. I'll start just now. Give another 30 seconds or so because people are busy coming into the room. I can ask all of you, the panelists, if you'd like to put links to your website or to your LinkedIn profiles or whatever. You can put it into the chat so people can explore you while they listen. Everyone who's here to listen to the session, please also introduce yourselves in the chat. Tell us where you're from, and you can put your questions there too. I am going to do my best to follow your questions. And if we don't manage to answer them all, we'll endeavor to answer them afterwards. But I think we're going to have quite a lively discussion. I'm very, very excited about this. I should also say that this is a very special panel for, well, a number of reasons. Besides the topic itself, we have two of our AUHF members as part of the panel. Sean O'Sullivan is with Select Africa, and they're a member of the African Union for Housing Finance. And Lou Schulman with I Build Global, also a member of the African Union for Housing Finance. And we're delighted that we have that kind of membership participation. Then in addition to that, we have two sponsors of this conference who are with us. So Karsten Popp from Edema Foundry, thank you so much for your support for the conference. And this happened, really very delighted to have your involvement. And Lou Schulman, again, I Build Global, thank you very much for your sponsorship of the conference. It really makes a big difference. This was a funny year for us. Normally we meet in a place, we get to shake hands. Here we don't get to do that, and we still need to keep the program running and facilitate the discussion around housing across the continent. And so Karsten and Lou, your sponsorship really made a difference in making that possible. So thank you. And then a thank you to everybody else in the panel as well, to Henny and to Julieta for taking the time also to join us today. And we're really looking forward to your to your perspectives and your insights about how do we even think about industrialized construction, this new paradigm, and what does that mean for affordable housing in Africa? I think we can start now with the program. We've got a lovely collection of people who are joining us. So please continue to introduce yourselves and put your questions into the chat so I can try and moderate the discussion so that we respond to it. Colleagues, if you want to respond to one another in the chat, that's also okay. However much multitasking you're happy with. This question of industrialized construction, I think, is a critical one, and perhaps even more so today, right now, because I have my mask. We are sitting here in a not quite yet post-COVID environment. It has been the most crazy year with things that we never thought possible happening all along and all around us. And we're having to get used to all sorts of new techniques and indeed new technologies. The critical thing, I think, though, in the housing sector, and especially in the affordable housing sector, and especially in this continent, is that as our governments have had to deal with the increasing pressures that COVID-19 have placed on them, we can see the expression of this pandemic very clearly in our human settlements across the continent, in part because we all had to stay at home. And for many people, that home was not adequate. And so that created all sorts of additional difficulties, inadequate in terms of the structure, also inadequate in terms of access to services. The basics of hand washing was difficult for very, very many people on this continent. And as the need for affordable housing and quality housing was exacerbated, as we saw it more clearly through this experience over the last 9 months or so, our resources to address it have gotten smaller because are busy focusing on the emergency situation, on the very real risk levels that people are facing. Companies have been struggling as well because as the economy has gone into very, very slow down, their ability to deliver in the way that was expected and planned has been constrained. In some cases, in other cases, businesses have gone out of business. And so, in fact, the size and the capacity of our construction sector itself is really constrained. So in this context, we have to do much, much more with much, much less. We very clearly need new, efficient ways of working. We just have to make do with a whole lot more. And in that context, the opportunity for technology, for new innovations, for disruptions to old ways of doing things becomes not just interesting and fun to talk about, but desperately needed. And so I'm very excited about this panel because I think we have panelists who have all already been doing it. Their shirt sleeves are already rolled up and they're already working in disrupting value chains and in making the affordable housing sector work in new ways. These efficiencies are critical, and we really do need to improve the value chain engineering. And I'm interested to hear about that from our panelists. I'm also interested to hear about how they're going to address this need for much better market targeting. I think colleagues across the continent have heard me talk about that quite a bit, that we sort of have this sense of affordable, and it's actually more like middle class. And we really have to focus our products and services on very poor people who do have some capacity to invest in their housing, but it's quite different than the way in which our established housing delivery systems and finance systems are accustomed to engage. And so how will we improve our market targeting and then respond to that, I think, is another issue. And I'm hoping that will be addressed in today's session. And then the third thing, thinking about the capacity that we need, if we have to do more with less, then we need more people to participate in that. And that means that we need to recognize a much wider diversity of participants in our housing sector. And oftentimes that's quite difficult to do because they're invisible, informal contractors, people with wheelbarrows at the side of the road, and so on, people who are improving homes, smaller businesses, and so on. all of that, how do we start to recognize the diversity and the breadth of that capacity as it exists on our continent? And anyone, I'm sure all of our guests here today, you drive anywhere from your home in this continent and you will see that there is a wide and diverse housing construction and housing delivery sector. So how do we harness that capacity? And I'm hoping that we will start to talk a little bit about that too in this. I think there's some really interesting opportunities that industrialized construction offer us. So to start the discussion, I'm going to start with first a round of introductions, or let my panelists introduce themselves and their businesses and what are they doing within this broad field. Then I have a series of questions which we'll see whether or not we get to, depending on what our audience says on the basis of what you tell us. So we're going to follow our noses through the discussion, but I know that you all have so much to contribute. So let's just get started. Karsten, you actually brought us together. You proposed this panel, and then you suggested everyone who would come and join you on the panel. Perhaps you can start telling all of us about this new industrialized construction paradigm. What does that actually mean? And where do you fit? Where does Elima Foundry fit within that value chain? Over to you.
All right. Right. Well, hope everyone can hear me, and thank you very, very much, Keisha,
Karsten,
for this.
You're on mute. You need to unmute yourself.
I am unmuted now. Can you hear me? No? I am unmuted. Can you hear me? Okay, very good. Thank you. First of all, thank you very much, Keisha, for this unique opportunity. I think I speak for all of us on the panel. We are all honored to have an important part in this so important conference of the AUHF around affordable housing. And it's been a real pleasure working with the team of panelists here who are all absolute pioneers, as you said, pioneers in the field of technology and finance in the world of affordable housing. And I think this is a unique opportunity for us to demonstrate there is already a lot of things happening. Many more things can and have to happen. As you said, it is breaking that cycle of poverty is what it's all about. And technology has made significant progress in this area. And we're so happy as a panel here to demonstrate where we are. I'm very proud to be part of this panel. And so, yes, what does the new construction industry paradigm, what does it all look like? What is industrial construction? I'll quickly just give a very brief overview and then hand over back to you, Keisha. So first of all, in terms of industrialized construction, traditional construction is, as we all know, one of the later industries that is going through the digital transformation. Many of the industries, fintech and so forth, have all passed. It's a very fragmented and siloed and project-based is what the traditional construction is all about, with lots of wastes, high costs, long times, little data, and very little transparency if one looks at the current and the traditional construction. Industrial construction, which has been a movement that has really accelerated throughout this year, but even has started end of last year. You can read, there's lots of readings materials on this from McKinsey and many companies talking about industrialized construction. And this is really looking at a holistic construction process. It's not just looking at the architect at the design stage or at the build phase or at the operate phase. Industrialized construction really is looking across the value from design, build, and operate. They're bringing much more manufacturing processes to construction. If we think of design for manufacturing, just in time, a lot of the practice that we've learned from manufacturing are moving over to construction. Much more repeatable and scalable. If we look at some of the challenges in Africa of over 500 million homes over the next 30 years, that's 40,000 homes a day. If one looks at the old processes, you've got to get to much more of an industrialized process, much more transparency. And if one thinks about the transparency of data, you know, is so important. If I look at the financing side of things, the whole value chain, if I can improve that transparency and that data-driven approach and the collaboration and integration, whereas, as I said, very much siloed approach in the past, and how can we collaborate with the whole value chain across design, build, and operate, and holistically view the whole situation. And really, I would say, in summary, industrialized construction is all about significantly, and I really want to underline the word significantly, reduction of cost and time and increase of quality, sustainability, and transparency as we look at construction as such. So that's what it's about. The reason I say Africa, why is it so important from an Africa perspective? If one looks at the numbers, if one looks at the opportunity to bring industrialized construction to these huge volumes that are necessary, I actually am so confident that Africa can become a first mover. And that's kind of my theme here. And that's why I'm so happy that we have an opportunity to become like a first mover to drive industrialized construction, not just in the first world country. I think it's actually not as much needed in the first world country than what it is needed in Africa and where the housing need is so huge. So where does Elima come in? Elima is an independent company, which we just formed not too long ago, 6 months ago. And we're based between San Francisco and South Africa for now, starting in South Africa with the mission to address all of Africa. We really are all about an AI-driven industrial construction platform, which we are introducing here at the AUHF show at our booth, working with a number of partners that are on this panel, with Muladi, with iBuild, and with News Story that you'll be hearing later. So we're very excited to be here, Keisha, and thank you very much for that opportunity, and very, very proud to be part of this esteemed panel here. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Karsten. Perhaps let's hear now from Henny. Can you tell us a little bit about Muladi and what you're doing and how you fit into this paradigm?
Keisha, I'm a tool and die maker. So my whole thinking is, how do I produce a mold to produce a component continuously at a known cost? So obviously, if I look at construction, it's very, very far away from the accuracy of injection molding. So my thought was, how do I then mold a house? And this is really where I started in 1986. And for me, in the reality, it was maybe I saw the crystal ball before some others did. And I just went through a massive learning curve. Since I started Muladi, I've been to 64 countries. I've built in Panama. We've been in Mexico. We've been, in countries that I never thought I'd visit. I've been to Russia. And housing is actually a global issue. Unemployment is a global issue. And, what drives me is that Maslow said, the fundamentals of life is food and shelter. And, sometimes I think that the world leaves the food and shelter part away. There's a massive demand for the basic needs, especially as Karsten said in Africa. So when I spoke to people in India and they wanted to do funding, very much like the Ghanaian bank, we need to look holistically. So if we look at one aspect, let's say funding, and we don't look at how do we produce the house affordable, then we really, in a sense, have no impact. So we have to look at industrial housing holistically. And this team is part of that holistic view where we all get together with our expertise. And this is what makes the team so much more stronger, is that we brought together a tremendous amount of knowledge in order to not reinvent the wheel when we come to bottlenecks or hurdles. So if we look traditionally, we rely on either government or a contractor to build us a home. So I saw a small little video clip about the Apple Mac. And they said when they took the Apple Mac out of the realm of the nerd and gave it to the public, that's when it exploded. So in a sense, what I've wanted to do is take Muladi out of the, I will not call the construction guys nerds. I won't be here next time you want to ask me to be on speaking. So, but what we tried to do is to take the difficulty in construction out of that knowledge base and change it into a system whereby we can give it to the population, because then the population can participate in their own construction and not dependent on either government or contractors to participate. And that really is where my forte lies. I keep on designing components that enhances the delivery of homes, and obviously reduces the cost, but fundamentally involving the community.
Thanks, Henny. Thank you very much. And I know that, I mean, 1986, you said, that's a really long time, and really driving a new form of construction. I guess that's part of my question. In fact, I keep on saying new form of construction, but you've been driving it since 1986. So it actually is well established. We'll come back to that about talking about market adoption. But let's first hear from Lou. Lou, tell us a little bit about iBuild. What do you do? How does it work, and how do you fit into this paradigm? You are still on mute.
Thank you, Kessia. I should be well practiced with unmuting since we've been doing it for the last 8 months. So thank you for the introduction. My name is Lou Schulman, and I'm a founder and chairman of the board of iBuild Global. And before I describe iBuild, I think that I just want to touch on 2 of the comments that were made about the current environment and where we need to go, because there's still a tremendous amount of work, and the issue really revolves around transparency. Transparency is really the issue that we have had difficulty overcoming, because transparency unlocks capital. And without capital, it's impossible to scale construction, whether it's industrialized or for individuals, to be able to solve the problem. And the second piece of that, obviously, is the large nature of the informal sector. The informal sector dominates the construction industry, and the difficulty is in the capability of that workforce, because it's so uneven. How do we address people that we can't reach, that we don't know, that essentially remain anonymous, sometimes for their entire careers? And that essentially is what iBuild does. It really addresses the value chain from top to bottom. With the enormous need of housing, affordable or otherwise, the only way to meet the challenge is to identify, organize, and ensure that that workforce is capable of managing the new technology, the new materials that are being invented and creating almost on a daily basis. And that's really where iBuild comes in. iBuild is a powerful platform that really touches every constituent in the value chain. It seamlessly tracks, facilitates the flow of money through the entire construction ecosystem. It combines the best of mobile technology, desktop technology, payment technology, and advanced analytics. iBuild really is an end-to-end solution dedicated to help solving the housing crisis. And when we say that, what we mean is that the technology allows user groups to be able to come on the iBuild platform, to be identified, to be rated, and then what we've done is we've given each segment tools to improve the delivery of housing, to improve the delivery of material, to improve the visibility of capital, to ensure that money that's being spent is actually being spent on that project, and that the desired result is being accumulated. And it's really been an amazing journey the last 5 years. There is a hunger for the ability to be able to understand what is going on and acquiring the skills and knowledge, and obviously the livelihood that essentially spurs growth in the construction sector. I'll stop there. Thank you, Kessia.
Just a quick follow-on question, Lou. I forgive the association, but I think I'm not the only one that does it. I've often said that iBuild is a bit like the Uber of the construction industry. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that is true. Essentially, what we've done is we've given the ability to be able to take your housing plight in your own hands. Because once the market is organized, not only is it organized for industrialized construction, but it's also organized for consumers. And what we've done is we haven't forgotten about the average person. It's really important that people that are struggling to create the dignity in housing that many of us achieve, that we give them the tools to be able to take their housing journey in their hands and to get good outcomes. And that obviously is a most important goal, because the majority of housing is not constructed to industrialize construction. It's done incrementally. Nearly 80% of home production is done using cash. And as a result of that, there was a need to have a technology that spoke to those individuals who make up the majority and to assist them with their journey. And iBuild has done that.
So you're aggregating, in fact, the massive small that Sita was talking about earlier in the Kenya presentation.
That's correct.
Sean, great, Sean. Tell us a little bit about Select and how you fit into this whole puzzle.
Thanks, Keisha. Well, I think what Lou's just said. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay. So, well, I think Lou's discussion now in terms of what they do, and the fact that, I mean, they've identified this informal sector where there's this huge demand for incremental, well, people build incrementally, but they need to be able to fund that. Traditionally, as Lou has said, it's done through cash. So essentially, that's where actually Select fits in. So over 20 years ago, this business started essentially as a traditional microfinance business, focusing only in Africa, where we currently in countries, we're in Eswatini, Lesotho, Malawi, Kenya, Uganda, and Mauritius, and the focus shifted about 10 years ago towards a more incremental housing finance or housing microfinance product. And as Lou said, I mean, we identified this, or we saw this opportunity, essentially because the customer base that we target currently occupy, in many instances, they occupy land that they own, but without title, essentially untitled land. And this sector of the market, we build incrementally, needed access to funding, and the traditional mortgage product doesn't really assist, and it doesn't meet that kind of need. So that's where Select comes from, and where we've played, the area that we've played in. So we tend to extend relatively small loan amounts. That's relatively small to the traditional mortgage, and instead of basing it on the price of the house, it's actually our loans are based on repayment capacity. So our customer base, which is traditionally we focus on the civil servant market in these jurisdictions that we operate in, and these loans are calculated based on an affordability level than what the cost of the building is. And so they build incrementally. And what's very interesting is something also Lou touched on, is that the if I can use the term, the byproduct of this incremental loan is you see the spill-off in the informal building sector. So 90% of our customer base builds using the informal sector, whether that's bricks or blocks that are built by small SME entrepreneurial suppliers, or window frames, etc. So it's been a long journey. I'm not going to bore you with the details of how we got to this, but I mean, today it is a large portion of our loan book in all the countries that we operate in. And this incremental product, I mean, there's we've had we've had a long association with the likes of Habitat for Humanity, who we've also, who have assisted us in providing technical expertise to be able to ensure that this loan product gets targeted at the right customer base. In addition to that, about 2 to 2.5 years ago, we've also actually entered the development space. So this is very new to the group. Select now has a property division. Our first development is based in Eswatini. We've just completed 150 apartments in a lifestyle estate together with a small retail offering. And there the group is now not only focused on, so we've actually developed the entire development from scratch, with obviously with the assistance of outside contractors, etc. But we also provide the end user finance, and so the group is now moving into more asset type secured lending as well, which is very exciting for Select. And I think it was a natural progression given the challenges that we have faced when we look at the market and trying to target some kind of asset-based lending. It's been very difficult. Obviously, we're not a large bank. We need to find feasible projects that we could supply end user finance to, and that's been quite a challenge. That's why I think this panel today is quite interesting and exciting to hear the direction that the market is taking. And anyway, to sort of meet that requirement, we've built our own department, and obviously providing end user finance is the next logical and feasible step for us. So that's where we are, Kasia.
Okay, that's fascinating and very interesting to hear your evolution from a housing microfinance that's responding to households and what they're doing already and the way in which they're wanting to use their money to build, to then thinking about construction and new build yourselves. I think that would make quite a nice case study to explore in more detail. I'll have to come back to you offline for that one. Giulietta, I would love to hear from you and tell me about what is the work that you're doing and how do you fit into this paradigm of industrialized construction?
Well, thank you so much, Kasia, for the introduction.
You're still on mute.
Can you all hear me? Perfect. Thank you so much for the intro, Kasia and Karsten, for getting us all together. I think what's most exciting about this panel is exactly what Kasia was saying at the beginning, which is industrialized construction is not something that's new. It's something that we're all very much doing, rolling up our sleeves, and it's out in the construction sites today. What's really exciting is pushing more people, getting more generations of leaders to come into the space and be applying their technologies into the housing space. So what I really loved, Henny, actually, is how you mentioned the Apple Mac and how it was for nerds at the beginning, but then it was brought to the mass population. And that's exactly what we're doing at New Story and at Home Team Ventures. It's diving into first world countries where we have these technologies that are really being applied generally for the first and top of the population. And what we're looking at is how can we take those innovations, take them from Silicon Valley and apply them first for social impact and specifically for housing. So that's truly our thesis. It's that these technologies that are disruptive in construction should be applied first for impact on the bottom billion, for the majority of the population that's getting most harmed really by natural disasters and right now the pandemic. And so just for a little intro on New Story and on Home Team Ventures, my name is Giulietta Morade and I'm the head of research and development at New Story. So New Story is a nonprofit home builder. We started about 5 years ago only, and we started through Y Combinator. So Y Combinator, for those of you who are not familiar, is the biggest incubator in the world. So that's where a lot of big tech startups have started from. And New Story was actually one of the first nonprofits to go through there. So going into that, we were one of the few groups that was thinking about impact versus best revenue generation and thinking about how can we be applying technology and disruptive innovations like industrialized construction when we're talking about housing. So we decided to do over the past 5 years is actually become home builders by working with local governments and local contractors to build communities. So over the past 5 years, we've built over 25 communities in Central and South America. The reason we're targeting developing countries is because we want to understand what are the biggest pain points in developing countries, the same issues that we see in South America are the same ones we see in Africa. And it really drives down the fact that the three biggest barriers we're seeing of why governments cannot be building more affordable housing units per year is, number one, the cost is too high, like Carsten was saying. Second is the speed at which we're building. We'll never be able to close the housing gap or get to the numbers that we need to unless we're building quicker. That's where industrialized construction starts coming in. And third is quality. Unless we're building to a high quality for the structures, during a natural disaster, during many years after generations of families living there, the houses will not be sustained or reliable. And so those are the three big buckets we're looking at. And how we started to address that is that in every community that we build over the past 25 communities, we're bringing in a new technology or innovation to apply to see, can we start breaking down these barriers of cost, speed, and quality? And so what we do is we typically partner with a research and development partner, a startup, an academic institution, an industry leader that has a great innovation in either software or hardware, material science, a process for building, which a lot of the panelists are talking about today. And what we're doing is we're applying it into a community to pilot it. So a lot of times in the built environment, it's very difficult to pilot. So if we're talking about the Apple Mac, in the tech industry, it's very easy to be building 1,000 cell phones and prototyping them quickly to see, does the technology work? Does it not? How do we start breaking down some of the barriers to make it even lower cost? But when it comes to housing, it's very difficult to be prototyping a home. So what we do is we go into communities and we pilot these innovations so that we could prove their impact and then get mass scalability by having other governments, NGOs, nonprofits see that it works and then apply it to their communities, wherever that is in the world. And so one of the best examples that we've had is actually by partnering with Icon 3D. Icon 3D is now one of the top leaders in 3D printing of homes. And what we did with them is we met the founders at a very, very early stage. So I saw one of the questions in the chat, I believe by Annette, was how do you get early adopters and next generation leaders into the space? Well, it's by investing into the startups very early on. So the founders were thinking of 3D printing, and we said, hey, we see an opportunity for you to apply 3D printing for housing, because this 3D printer is going to build a lot quicker. We could build 2 homes every 24 hours and reduce costs significantly because we're reducing the amount of material of concrete, which is one of the most expensive components when it comes to housing. Material costs are between 40 to 70% of the full cost of the home. So how do we start reducing that material cost? And so what we did with Icon is we permitted the very first home in the US, but then we scaled it in a developing country in Mexico. So we scaled an entire community, and the very first community that was ever built in history for 3D printed homes was for the bottom billion, for people that were homeless. And so that's really that thesis of applying these innovations first for impact. And so over the past 5 years, we did just that. We built, several thousand homes in 25 communities. We've adopted a lot of innovations. And what we saw, to answer Annette's question of how do we start bringing in more innovators, entrepreneurs, technologists into the space, is actually by finding them at the earliest stage and by investing into startups when they're pre-seed and seed, and start allowing them to pursue this path of working in innovation for affordable housing, getting more innovators in this space by adapting their technologies for the use case of working in rural places or urban places in developing countries for the use case of the bottom billion, for the use case of affordable housing. And so that's how we started Home Team Ventures just 3 months ago, which is a fund, a VC fund, that will be investing into early stage companies, just like Icon, but various different kinds of innovations, so software and hardware and material science that we could then be applying to housing to start breaking down these barriers that I was mentioning.
That's just tremendous. Thank you very much. Very, very, very helpful. A question's just come in for you, Julieta. Aqualine Suliali has asked, how much is the average 3D printed house that you build with Icon? How much does
So
it
Icon
cost?
actually has various different kinds of printers. For example, right now they're printing another community in Austin, Texas, in the US. They also have a partnership now with NASA. So that's going to be a different kind of printer, of course. The printer that we're working with, our target price is under $10K. So under $10,000 per unit is what we're targeting. So right now we're very much in the early stage of piloting. So we're only building 20 homes for our first pilot, and then we'll be reducing the cost of every community that we're building. So that's really our target. And the reason we picked that number is because we did extensive research into what's the unit cost of a home in US dollars, such that more governments would be able to be building more homes. And what we saw that in Central and South America is that if we attain that price point of $10,000 all inclusive, that's when we could start really having more accessibility for the bottom billion. Cassia, something you were saying before was that, a lot of times we're talking about housing affordability, we're talking about medium class. but we're targeting the bottom billion, those people that don't have jobs necessarily, people that are living on less than a few dollars a day is what we're really targeting.
Okay, thank you. Just one last question about your home team ventures, and that's a pretty ambitious venture that you're embarking on now, and to focus on Africa and to put investments into Africa. What is it that you see? What are the opportunities that you see? Why do you think now is the time to do that?
I mean, the main reason of why now is the time is really twofold. The first is the fact that today there's 1.6 billion people in the world. It's not just an Africa problem, it's a global problem, just like Lou was saying before, that are currently homeless, that currently don't have shelter. And the number is going from 1.6 billion to 3 billion by 2050. So if we're starting to look at how much supply we need to provide, how many homes we need to be building until 2050 to attain 3 billion, by just building how we're traditionally building, we will never attain those numbers. And so what we started looking at is how can we be building differently? Again, by if we reduce the cost, we could provide more supply. And then if we could build quicker, what are technologies that will allow us to achieve that? So what we realized is that by just building communities, we will never attain the impact that we want, which is to somewhat collectively get to a number that's closer to 1.6 that we need. And so when we started looking around, what we saw is, for example, Habitat for Humanity, which is the giant in terms of building affordable homes, they're building about 100,000 homes per year. So again, we're never going to be able to get to those numbers that we're trying to see. But if we could be driving innovation into the space, then we could have other contractors, other builders locally, and then globally as well, using these technologies to be providing more supply. The second part of the answer, though, as to why now is really the opportunity, is because if we look at the construction sector as a whole, it is the largest market. It represents 13% of the global GDP, yet it's the least innovative market. So McKinsey did this wonderful report where it showcases every single industry vertical, and construction is at the very bottom for least digitized, right above farming. So we've been building the same way for over 100 years, and that supply chain that we're looking at today is for how we've been building for 100 years, and that no longer works. And so what really the opportunity is that there's very few players right now in the game. Less than 0.5% of the value of construction is put into research and development. So with only 0.5% of the value of construction being put into innovation, that means we're just not innovating. There's not enough players that are innovating and not enough adopters, not enough contractors, developers that are actually implementing these innovations into their own projects. So the opportunity is on one end because we need the massive impact of having to attain more supply for housing. And the second part of it is really we need more innovation in construction. And we fundamentally believe that if we achieve more efficiencies in construction with cost, speed, and quality, that's going to have a ripple effect directly into housing. Because if we look at the full construction value chain, we need to be having more efficiencies pre-design when we're looking at land surveying and permitting, to design, to then building, and then after maintenance and inspections. And that's going to have a direct ripple effect into housing specifically. So with Home Team Ventures, our thought was, how do we get, again, more innovators into the space by investing them at the earliest stage, and then also helping them as home builders and as developers ourselves, helping them think through, how do we adapt this technology for housing? How do we engage more people to care about the impact? And then also do proof of concept projects into developing countries, work in areas like Africa, like South America, where they could be applying their technologies there as a quick proof of concept because the regulations are lower, so it's lower risk for them to be prototyping quickly. And they could also be proving their technology to the world. So it's very much a double bottom line approach of, on one end, you're having massive impact, and on the other, able to scale and grow your business.
That's great. Thank you very much. I'm going to move on to Henny now. I have a question for Henny, but Julietta, take a look at the chat. There's a whole lot of questions there asking about costs and specs, and you just answer them in the chat. I think that's the best way to do it. Henny, you know, Julietta was talking about how this is an industry that needs transformation, and I think you've been shouting that from the rooftops for quite some time, and you're often referencing the shift in terms of the construction of the automobile. So just a question for you. Having been around the block a few times with this, you have delivered the prototype, and you've really had to push hard to get market adoption and to get people to recognize. I'd like to hear a little bit more about how you did that. what you bumped into and how you overcame it. I'm interested if, for example, how did you engage with local authorities who didn't understand your building approach, and how did you demonstrate that that was viable? Tell us a little bit about the journey you took to get here to really put Maladi on the map and create some acceptance for the product. But unmute yourself so we can hear you.
Keisha, you know, I think that if you just look 4 million houses in Africa as a backlog, if I was in conventional construction, I would be happy that there's 4 million houses backlog. I would not be concerned. It would not be an issue that I need to address. So when you speak about technology in order to address this on an industrial scale, you have to interact with this existing hurdle. So in reality, if you just imagine Henry Ford designing his Model T and then going to Mr. Horse and Carriage and saying to him, instead of stopping at B and changing horses and going into the hotel and having a whiskey and a bath, we can skip B, we can skip C, we can skip D, and we can go to E. It's not in the interest of Mr. Horse and Carriage. So we have to create new people that uses to address the 4 million house backlog. Otherwise, it's a sales process of trying to convince someone what you do and what you see. And that is really time wasting. So we don't deal with conventional contractors. We deal with many other people that see the opportunity. So the real advantage of Maladi currently is that when we cast a house, as Julieta says, wall cost is an X amount, roof cost, foundation cost, roofing cost. Then if you look at the supply chain of building a house, if the 6 of us went and quoted on a tender or quoted for a project, and we then went first stop to the hardware, and we get all our materials from the hardware, which is already a middleman. And this middleman most probably goes to China to buy window frames. So if we then look at the cost of raw material, we look at our profit margin, and we look at our time constraints, then we are actually fighting each other for a very small amount of money. So like the Japanese did with Kanban, is they said, what type of car can we produce for a type of person that can afford it? So this is really, again, where, well, in a sense, he's my hero. Henry Ford comes along and produces a Model T. And many years later, he produces the Model T for far less than what he started off with, because he's optimized this process. So he's not exploiting his laborers. He's paying them good money so that they can become customers of his Model T. So that whole principle of involving your people so that they can generate an income as part of the production. So we need to skill new people. And if we look at our education system system in Africa is very orientated to the British standards brought in 1900, and that's mathematics and science. So we focus very much on the top of the pyramid when it comes to education with a degree, but we neglect the artisan at the bottom. So in a sense, we have 800,000 graduates in South Africa that are unemployed because we don't produce matches. So all of a sudden, we need to look at what do we use to stimulate the economy of South Africa. We have 10.2 million people unemployed. We have 3.2 million houses. Nigeria has got a backlog, they're not sure, it's between 17 and 23 million. So if you look at every house and it needs 5 door frames, it's an industry. So if we consolidate this focal point and we say, let's use this crisis in a sense to stimulate the economy, because government then of course has got more taxpayers. So it is the circular economy that everybody so glibly talks about. But we have a tool to speed up the construction, not just in the walls, because remember, we need to look at windows, we need to look at door frames, we got to look at all of these things. And this is where I, as a non-builder, look at construction and I say, why do we use an NC2 window? Because it's an English 1033 millimeter by 949. So all of a sudden you challenge these things, and this is how Maladi keeps on developing product into a slab system and a window system, a toilet system, and so we carry on, because we know that when I started in 1986, there was a backlog. In 2020, that backlog is 10 times bigger. So if I didn't play a role, or if conventional construction addressed the backlog, I wouldn't be a player. But the advantage that we have is we've redefined our whole system, and that includes financing, managing with an app when a window is used on site, a photo when the foundation is cast. All of this type of information is part of Maladi. And you know, sometimes if I had 3 hours, then I would have yacked till the cows come home.
We're going to have to make another time for that, because I do think that you really have so much experience to share with us about how do we penetrate markets that are fairly happy with the status quo. Well, think they're happy with the status quo. Lou, you've also been facing this in trying to integrate your product and your approach into markets. And I've been fascinated with how you've thought about the value chain, and that you've completely changed the way that value chain works in some cases. I'd love to hear some more about how you've managed that, your interaction with other players on the value chain, and the extent to which they engaged with what you did or resisted it. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, you know, I guess the best way to describe that is a conversation that I had 5 years ago. When we first started thinking about technology solution, it really was because we'd been so unsuccessful with constructing affordable housing in Africa and in the developing world. You know, it's not a solution if it doesn't scale. So I was having a conversation with one of the board members of Kenya Federation of Master Builders, describing what I thought was going to be iBuild, and he laughed. He said, "You'll never get all of those people together to agree on one thing, let alone allow you to be able to connect them, to create transparency in transactions, to ensure that the construction is on time." Fast forward to today, he's on our advisory board, and more than 1,000 of KFMB's contractors are on the platform in Kenya. So, you know, the reality is it's difficult, because what I found is what creates opportunity in the developing world is timelines that have created instability. And instability meaning the dissatisfaction of consumers with the governments that essentially are supposed to be providing them with their basic needs. With all that being said, it's still very difficult to get government agencies to be first adopters. Why? Because of risk. No politician wants to be signing on for something that potentially could come back to haunt them. So the reality is that it does not encourage innovation, because innovation comes every day of the week. And because many of those tested, they have a very hard time getting adopted. Recognizing this, what we did was we went to the market first. We essentially said, okay, for-profit companies are only interested in the bottom line. Those particular individuals, those companies, those organizations are always looking for ways to reduce their costs and for that to show up in their profit and loss statements. So what we did was we essentially went after some of the largest corporate entities that were already involved in some way, shape, or form with the construction industry. Manufacturers to manage their supply chain on our suppliers module, developers like Shelter Afrique, who have projects in multiple countries and need to be able to understand what's going on, not just on a monthly basis, but on a daily basis when it comes to their funds and the progress of those projects. Contractors who have a very difficult time finding workers with the right skill set to be able to do their projects. Workers who oftentimes travel around the city, spending their last penny finding a work site and then being hired like a commodity with not even an understanding of what their skill set is to contribute to that particular project. And then offering a space for innovation to then show their projects and to get validation that can then be shared widespread. And when I say widespread, not just countrywide, but globally. So when we looked at that, we also realized that we could improve the quality of lives of these individuals, not just from providing them with a job or work, but also by joining those resources like insurance that essentially in the developed world, we take for granted as being something affordable. And we've done that with insurance companies that essentially are providing new products, workman's compensation for workers that allows them, if they get hurt on the job, to now have something to sustain them. And really this journey has been quite amazing because it's proven to us that when you have technology that provides connectivity and trust, then essentially you can encourage innovation to appear because it then gives them visibility widespread. And essentially that visibility is what financial institutions desire, whether it's Paulu, whether it's Shelter Out Greek, whether it's the government of Indonesia. Everyone wants to make sure that their money is being well spent. And essentially, that's what we've accomplished. We're seeing more and more now that government agencies, World Bank, large institutions like Catholic Charities, CRS, of course, is a big proponent of what we're doing, and essentially Habitat for Humanity, who actually last year made the largest investment that they've ever made in a for-profit company, specifically because they experience the same pain in managing the value chain that everyone else does in the developing world. And now, with iBuild, you have the ability to essentially reduce those pain points and through data, understand the progress and the issues as they come up and address those effectively.
Fantastic. I mean, I love the thought of that you're creating the platform, and pardon the pun, but for the systems to evolve, that it actually is organic. You're just opening up the space for that. You're removing the barriers so that innovation can then grow. I'm busy negotiating a few extra minutes to our session because I think, as Henny said, we could go on forever. So I'm doing that. And I think that the next session is going to be a little bit late in starting. So let me quickly ask Sean, one of the things that's I think we have to have in our minds is that we need the financial products that actually engage with these new approaches of construction. All of our financial products are designed for I guess more traditional, more conventional mechanisms of construction. Have you changed the design of your financial products, your housing microloan, or now you're into mortgage finance? Have you changed the structure of your products to suit this kind of innovation, and are you continuing to do that?
Yes, thanks, Kasia. Can you all hear me? Just make sure before I rattle on and no one can hear me. I think what's interesting, what's coming out from this discussion is that this shake-up is long overdue from a construction point of view, and as a relatively new entrant into the industry from a construction point of view, I couldn't agree anymore. It's amazing to see from a financial perspective, you know, and working in a financial services industry for the last 30 plus years, it's quite an, I use the word amusing, and I don't mean it I don't mean to offend anybody, but in the construction industry, if you compare financial services, if you're a financial services provider and you need to provide a particular solution, whether that be a loan structure or whether it be any financial instrument that you can think of, what will happen is that the customer will come to you with a basic requirement, and the financial industry, the service industry, will sit down and design a solution. There may be alternative A and there may be alternative B, but you'll have a solution to the problem or to the challenge, etc. In the construction industry, what we have found is it's an industry that doesn't work together. And as both Lou and Henny have mentioned, and I know Carsten understands this very well, it's always amazed us how all these separate areas within the entire development sector, construction sector, actually work against each other. And I can understand that I can't recall who used the analogy, but it's not in their interest to change that. Okay, and that's been very, very obvious to us, who have always been providing the solution from a financial services perspective. So I know I'm going a long way around to answer your question, but I think unless that changes, the traditional mortgage is a product that is just unfortunately not ideal for solving this problem, particularly at the lower end of the pyramid. Okay, so yes, Select has, I mean, we still believe that the incremental microfinance loan has had a huge impact on our customers' lives, for their ability to be able to genuinely put a roof over their head. You know, and I can quote some numbers. It's quite interesting. You know, we had a very successful project in Malawi, which was essentially funded by the Soros Foundation initially. That business now is a sustainable business. It runs, that loan's been repaid. We have thousands and thousands of customers who have either started building or have completed their homes. And this takes but again, through using traditional outdated technology to build and develop the homes, which again, I think there's not only is this innovation great from a financial services point of view, but also, you know, the fact that, you know, we have very little control over the quality or the scale of the development as a financial services provider if we don't understand the development sector. And I think that's where this kind of technology makes a huge difference for us. I think what we're also seeing, there's a move towards, there's a move towards local or communities at least attempting to try and create a more structured environment where I firmly believe that if we could be a little more successful, particularly lobbying governments, etc., to try and help with the formalization of parcels of land, etc., it'll go a long way in being able to provide end user finance. So the biggest challenge at the moment I'm generalizing when I say the mortgage market, I'm just talking about end user financiers, is the fact that they struggle to be able to provide long-term sustainable finance to the end user because it's very difficult to secure the assets. Okay, and that's been a common you know, when we discuss some of the major cities like Nairobi, etc., and you look at the number of registered mortgages, it's shocking. I mean, again, it's not because of a lack of appetite from institutions like ourselves. It's very difficult to be able to secure the asset because of title, etc. I think the second thing is yeah.
No, I was just going to say that there's a session on Wednesday. It's the one link in the chain we don't have in this panel. is where technology is engaging with the value chain in terms of land registration systems. And there's a nice session on Wednesday to take a look at, which is exploring blockchain technology and its application. I wonder if we can move on, because we do have a time constraint, and I want to give Karsten an opportunity to actually wrap up the conversation and tell us really, Karsten, I mean, you've sat here very patiently, and there are all of these different innovations, which presumably you'll be engaging with all of them. You mentioned artificial intelligence, AI, at the beginning, that's what you're focusing on. If you could just explain that a little bit more to us, what do you mean? What are you doing in this space, and how are you? What part of all of what you've heard are you targeting? Tell us about what you think the future is going to look like around industrialized construction and everything.
Okay, I think someone's phone is on there, right? Okay. Well, I'm going to steal this minute that you gave me, Keisha. Can you guys hear me? Okay, I'm going to steal this minute because I can see there's many investors on the call. There's many political people on this call, many technologists, and yes, ILIMA is only 6 months, but we had since we exist, and I'm the CEO of ILIMA, and so we saw a lot of these things. And as I've said already, with Henny and Muladi and with Eibel, and with the news story, there's partnerships that we're forming because we're seeing there's no way anybody is going to do this alone. But because the investors, politicians, and developers on this call, I really want to underline, we have here a number of pioneers. We have a unique chance, and I cannot, I live in San Francisco, grew up in Africa. I cannot emphasize enough the opportunity that we have in Africa to become a first mover, and I like that word, first mover, towards this new paradigm called industrial construction, which is all about lowering the cost, as Julieta said, and many people. It's about improving the speed of development, and it's about sustainability and quality. That's exactly what we need. And it's not at the top of the pyramid. The top of the pyramid has always got the innovation and has always got the new things. And if we try to apply what we're talking about here to old ways of doing things, we're going to make incremental, but we're never, ever going to get to those 500 million homes and the amount of homes. We never, ever. So we've got to get together and move to this more transparent end-to-end industrialized construction flow. If I see the amount of technologies available already, Julieta mentioned 3D printing. We saw the incredible formwork activities from Muladi. There's a lot of precast companies. There's more and more newer companies. And what you need is making these newer technologies available, so to reduce the cost and the time. And that's really what I would say the call to action is to really make Africa as a global leader in this trend. We need to get the financial people, the government, as Sean said, we need to, I think the timing is now. Everyone has a mobile phone. There's technology, data is coming into the play. ILIMA, yes, is AI-driven industrial construction platform. We're linking a lot of the newer technologies, be it 3D printing, be it formcast, be it precast, and making those available through a smart building advisor so that people in the value chain can very early, if I build my home using 3D printing, if I build my home using formwork, if I build my home using modular design concepts, what is the cost? What is my time to market? But the systems have to change. It cannot be that I'm using South Africa now. You have 241 pages of regulatory and code that you need to sign to build. Technology has advanced, as Henny has said. Technology is ready to build a house in 1 or 2 days. Julieta, everyone said that. We have systems and banking and mortgage systems that take 2 years to sign. In the end, we want to get homes to people who need it most. That's what we're here all about. So I would say ILIMA has had the opportunity as a new startup to see what's happening. I think if we can, our biggest plea and call to action would be, we have the chance, together with the financial institutions, the regulatory and the political institutions, as well as the developers specific. Developers are at the core of changing this way towards a new way of doing things. And ILIMA is focused exactly that. We're engaged in 2 pilot projects right now in the so-called mega projects in South Africa, which are looking at communities, again, community in the middle of this, and seeing how affordable homes can be built in a more cost-effective, faster, more quality and more sustainability. And that's with our AI platform. So I don't have the time. I would very much recommend we have a booth one of the few booths at the AUHF. It's just, I think, next door. And so anybody who's interested to speak to our people, to see some of our platform in action, we've got some links into Muladi, we've got some links into iBuild, we've got some links into New Story in terms of solutions. And our goal is to bring innovation to the fingertips of the people who need it most, and not just to the first world countries.
Wow, Carsten, that's great. Thank you. I'm actually going to give you 3 more minutes because I want to ask one last question. And if you could maybe talk to us a little bit about your experiences in engaging with government. And so you said that you're part of the mega projects, and those are government
yes.
subsidized projects. That's astonishing. What is the nature of the conversation you're having, and what are the kinds of ways in which you have to argue your case, demonstrate it as a new way of doing things? Let's describe that a little bit.
Yeah, I think what's absolutely core, I think many people are going, as far as we've now seen, are going to the government and have theoretical solutions and have great ideas and so forth. I think the time is over to have all these theoretical solutions and arm-waving sort of presentations. I think what you need is proof. We're joining very much also with Muladi in this case, who's, as you've heard, have got really existing solutions. So we try, that's why we're teaming up with people who actually have solutions. So on the one hand, you have to sell innovation in the future. You spoke about the blockchain technology that helps us get to deeds that are actually digital versus getting lost and not being worked with. So we're able to work on the mega projects, which are of the largest projects right now in South Africa. And there are ways that the government, I think, is hungry for seeing existing solution proposals that, and so we have the opportunity, and one of these or 2 of them, which are a little bit more PPP driven, so a little bit where the private sector is potentially a little bit stronger, where the developer, in fact, the decision makers in the 2 cases we're involved, the developer is extremely strong and sort of just saying the old ways, guys, is just not going to work. We're not going to be able to make the costs. If you have the choices of how many houses, how many schools, what the community, get the community involved, and you can make those choices, and the building technology is very important. It's not just brick and mortar. Brick and mortar is one option, but if you have multiple options and you can give that at the fingertips of a developer that can say, I am going to look at various options to produce this mega city. Our goal is to build the first one and pilot the first one with a number of core partners, both local in Africa as well as international, and prove the point that we can build these mega cities, lower cost and significantly lower cost. Julieta mentioned some pricing there, but lower cost, much faster, more sustainable, more quality. So RDP and all these things haven't worked. The quality was bad. So we're working on a pilot project. And once that pilot project can be done, we're all about scalability and repeatability. So if you can do one of these mega projects, as they're called, and maybe just a word that's maybe overused in South Africa versus the rest of Africa, but if you bring that scalable repeatability into the process of building communities and involving communities, and you can scale and repeat that, you have a solution. And we're really looking at the government to help accelerate that activity as we are involved in these 2 pilot projects. Okay, sir.
Well, that's excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much. What I've been so encouraged by in the discussion that we've had, and in fact also in the chat as well, is that there's so much enthusiasm for these approaches and interest and curiosity. And I can see that you're all investing your capital to make this work and to start to drive some change in the construction industry. We do need that. We understand that, and I think agree. I would like to invite all of you, as well as our audience, but specifically also the 5 of you, to come and join the next panel, which is starting right now, because it's about national progress with SDG 11. And I think that it's Monica Glinsler, who's the Director of International Relations, the Department of Human Settlements in South Africa, is going to be in discussion with Umar Silah, who we heard from this morning, the Director of the Regional Office for Africa and UN Habitat. And I think it would really be good to put some questions into that conversation about how do we take this further on real pieces of land in real places with real rights. I'd love you to come along with me into that next room. One other thought I had, I'm a huge, great proponent of case studies. I think case studies are really helpful for people to understand what are the different options that are available and how do they work and can they be applied in different contexts. And I would urge you all to really think about that, putting together what you do into a case study that gets into detail, so people can really feel like they don't just have an advertising leaflet, but they understand the detail, the depth, the numbers, the math of what you're doing. And then secondly, I think that there's a need to start to sharing what you're doing, and then all of the other producers. Someone mentioned block solutions as well, other innovations, ABT innovations, to start to profile that, so we get a sense of what the market looks like and where the innovation is, so that we don't keep on saying this is new and strange, but it actually gets mainstreamed. So thank you very much, all of you. For some of you, it's quite early in the morning, who've come to us from the United States and from far across the other side of the United States. So thank you for that. I hope we can see you in person at some point, and certainly at the next AUHF conference, which we hope will be actually in Kigali in real life. Thanks for your time and your insights, and I hope to connect again soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kessia. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you. Great
Thanks,
teamwork. Great teamwork. Great teamwork. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.